Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming today to the artist talk for the Menagerie show. We have several of the artists here, but unfortunately Courtney's not here, so I'm going to just read his statement and then turn it over to each artist, and then they can turn it over to the other artist, and then we'll carry on. So Courtney did the ceramic sculptures that you see, and the wall pieces, a couple wall pieces. He lives and works in Philadelphia as a sculptor and teacher. He was born in Washington, D.C., raised in Philadelphia. He got his MFA at Kent State University in Ohio, worked at the Cleveland Institute of Art, and he moved to Philadelphia, and he was a technician at the Clay Studio and has been an adjunct professor at many institutions. He's currently an adjunct at the community college. And clay is his primary medium, and found objects also play an important role. So you can see he's got found stools and stands. So his statement, Matt says, I'm interested in the connection to adult playing and art making, particularly the rules that guide both activities and the opportunity for improvisation inside those rules. My work has characteristics that occupy ideas on either side of art, play, adult, child, serious, non-serious. He chooses imagery that overlaps his personal experience as child and adult. With these ideas in mind, I'm currently attempting to create a dimensional version of what literary criticism and poets refer to as the objective correlative. I play with my imagery by distorting or altering it and mixing, matching, and experimenting with arrangements till I arrive at unforeseen, interesting content. My work has recently been influenced by Chinese culture and the relationships I built with faculty, students, and artists I've met while doing 3 2-month residencies at Lanzhou City University in central China. So, pretty interesting. So that's Matt's story. So maybe Dan, I'll turn it over to you. Go next.
Well, interesting to see all these interpretations of creatures. Millicent was a classmate of mine at the Academy.
Classmate?
Yeah. And she was doing prints like this at that time. 60 years of animals. You didn't know her then, but I did. Her prints were not unlike what she was doing. She was fascinated by these creatures that she was doing. And I like that kind of consistency.
She liked to haunt the Philadelphia Zoo, I know. She always went there.
Yeah. The Academy used to the zoo gave us free passes to the zoo, which was nice. And very few people went out there. So there were always piles of free passes. So I used to go out maybe a couple of times a month. And there was an animal drawing prize, it's still offered at the Academy, called the Packard Prize. And I'm sure she competed for that. And that sort of started a lot of our interest in animals. I especially like the small mammal house out there, especially in the winter. There was a little heat in there, and I became especially fond of the Australian bush dog. He and I became great friends. I did many drawings of the Australian bush dog. I went to the birdhouse, which was very nice to do. I think art's really about influence. And that bothers a lot of people. I had a good friend who wasn't a friend. In fact, it was the opposite. I tolerated him, probably tolerated me too. But he used to claim that he had no influences. And that's a popular thing to suggest. I'm unique. I felt like writing about 30 names on a piece of paper and sending it to him. He was influenced by everybody who had, I think, ever picked up a watercolor. So influence is profound. And that's where we learned. I got very interested in Franz Marc's work when I was a student. So interested, I actually went to Kokow, little village just south of Munich, where he was born, where he's buried. I wanted to see the locale where he'd grown up and what influenced him to do what he did. And instead of dealing with animals externally, he internalized them. He was interested in how animals might perceive the world, not our perception. Curious kind of extension. I got interested in the work of Morris Graves much later. Came to prominence in the 1940s. He was a Zen guy, influenced by China and Japan. I did lots of birds, animals, and really felt that was more than a Western idea of separation between the artist and the subject. And that's sort of the way we teach. I'm here, the still life is there. I'm here, the model is there. The Chinese put you right in the center of the landscape. You're participating. You're right there, it's all around you. They say, don't just paint the tree, you become the tree. Internalize it, that, which I try to do, and what I am involved with. I like the idea of birds because they're the freest thing that I know. And this is the only field where you can be free. I've tried other fields, and I don't think there's any much freedom left in this world, but as an artist you can be. You might starve to death, but you're free. This little insect that I did that years ago. And when I was doing it, I thought of Albert Ryder's definition of what art is. And he said, it's an insect walking very slowly along a branch. But when it gets to the end of the branch, it reaches out and there's nothing there. Can't hold on to anything. He said, that is when art starts. Interesting thought. So I hope we entice ourselves out to the end of the branch and reach out where there's new comfort.
Thanks. So, Kerri, you want to say something?
Sure. I'm Kerri Sacco. I'm a printmaker and a painter, although I haven't done printmaking for a long time. I currently live in Lancaster County. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, though. So my influence with animals has just been a lifelong drawing them from life. So when I was asked to do the show, it was like right up my alley, because I refer to our house as a menagerie. We have 2 dogs and a cat and a little mini horse now, so it just, and getting people to come house it for us, I'm like, it's not just the house, okay, it's the whole menagerie. So my pieces for this show, I have this cluster of elephant paintings here, and I have had really great teachers in my life, particularly in undergrad at Miller's University, Robert Nelson. And his work is all about animals, and that was a huge influence on me in college. He is still actively drawing and exhibiting. He's as amazing as Dan Miller is.
And your horses.
Yeah. He was actually my printmaking professor at Millersville, but then he was our drawing teacher too, so he's an extraordinary draftsman. So my elephant portraits came out of another teacher's influence, which was not art related, but it was yoga related. My one teacher is like a master storyteller, and she has like her 2 masters, but one is from Yale for creative writing. So she would talk to us during class about different, you know, the symbolism of animals and how it relates to, you know, your body points. And so the elephant is appears twice in the whole line of yoga chakras. So I was searching out like kind of what it meant, you know, like a lot of times they symbolize wisdom or patience and that kind of stuff. So that's how I started looking for images to do, you know, the mother and the adult, and the baby. But then I delved more into the relationship of elephants too, and how it's like, you know, the ants help raise the babies too, and I just found it fascinating. So that was like, and some of my titles reflect a lot of the mother-child or the relationship, side by side, learning to lead, as well as patience, wisdom, those kind of things. My other artwork here in the exhibit is, I have a collection of roosters, and I do love birds. I love songbirds, roosters, birds of prey. We live in a really beautiful like birding area, and I've learned a lot from the people who've come through our property. You know, I just like ask them like, what are you looking at? And I don't even see it, and all of a sudden they'll just like point to something that's like up in the tree. So my chicken and rooster paintings, my husband always says that I paint attitude, and I think I do. I think I capture them because they are just comical, funny, bold, and that just as a group of animals in an environment, I just love watching them and seeing what they're doing. I do not have chickens. I overheard somebody at one of my outdoor shows saying, "Oh, she lives in Lancaster. She must have chickens." But I don't have chickens. So, and I get a kick out of titling them too, with, you know, the squawking chickens especially, and then I like the regal ones. So yeah, that's pretty much like my influence with animals. Like I said, it's been a lifelong thing, but I just have chosen to go forward with it and incorporate it into my regular exhibitions now.
It is a small painting of your farm.
Oh, the small painting down there is so interesting. It's a plein air piece, and I did it for a Chester County event. So when I arrived, I was all thrilled. The horses were out in the pasture. I set up, took a couple reference photos, started painting, and then the owner comes out. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll put the horses away." I was like, "No!" So he put the horses away. And right where that horse is, I just had a big blob. I'm like, well, I'll turn it into like a tree stump or something. And then I just hated it, because what I liked about, you know, what strikes you as a plein air painter is like that very first impression. So I went back and I put the horse in. And I'm telling you, after having a mini horse, it's really hard to paint a full-size horse. I just want to shorten their legs and make them like little minis, but these were big, beautiful horses. So, but that is not my farm, that's at Chester County Farm. Thanks.
Thanks, Kerri.
Thank you.
Philippa, you want to talk about your cats?
Sure. So my name is Philippa Beardsley, and I made a cat painting commission a couple years ago for Kerri Sacco, and worked on it for about a year, and ever since then I've been haunted by cats, and they just keep appearing in my paintings. There's only one painting here that is from life, and that's my cat Space Dog on the end, next to my Halloween costume. But the rest of these paintings are cats from memory and impression.
What's your support?
So these are cigar boxes that I've taken apart and then cut panels for.
And that's is that a lid? Or-
Yes, yeah, it's a lid or a back. Yeah, that's another thing I like to play with, is the shape of the box.
So they're painted on boxes?
Yeah, boxes and then panels that I cut from Luan are mounted on top.
Oh, it's
It's very thin plywood.
Oh.
And obviously, this is important to you.
Yeah,
You know.
yep, yeah. Thank you.
So Dori, how about you? You want to
Okay.
say a few things? Thanks so much.
Sure. Well, I have a very varied background. I was a fashion illustrator early on in my career, and then I went back to school to learn to paint. And when I really started painting in my studio, it was quite isolated, and my daughter had just gone to school full-time, so I literally ran out of the studio one day and registered for an etching course at PAFA, and I fell in love with it, and that was about 25 years ago. So I worked constantly, and it did the trick for me. It was a lifesaver. I had no community. Now I had a community. I had a place to work with wonderful teachers and wonderful students. So it was great, and so I never stopped, and even kept on painting and etching. So in the beginning, I did traditional etchings. And it was really kind of similar to the fashion work, because I use line in my fashion, and I am a figurative artist, but I have a love of dogs, and I actually, did my own dogs, and I've always had these English Cocker Spaniels, so I don't have any of them here, but then I went to do other breeds, so I have a whole portfolio of dogs, different breeds, and so there's 3 of them here. I continued to etch like that for about 15, 17 years, until I was kind of getting a little upset about the acid, and it was giving me some negative physical issues. So I didn't want to stop going to the print shop, and so I fell into doing this technique that we were taught. It's called the Gauguin transfer. All you do is roll ink on the back of your drawing and trace over it. So what I would do, I'm fascinated by pattern, so in love with Japanese prints. So I started to shop for beautiful pattern paper, lay it down, and I figured out a way to do the transfer on top of it. So that it evolved into something that had a life of its own, and I was happy. I wasn't actually. I started trying to etch in my garage with a more, which I thought was a more non-toxic solution. It was pool chemicals. And it was a bloody mess, because it was an iron substance. It had copper sulfate, and you get this red sludge. Ugh, it was awful. So, and it was still burning my skin. So I said, okay. So first I had done the collage with the etching on top, which was really cool. But then I transferred to this technique. So, and I also, with the etchings, everything is so expensive, the plates, I wanted to start working huge. And I didn't ever think I could handle a huge plate like that. They're heavy and they're ungainly, so that was another reason I just needed to move on. And now I'm still in the print shop, like they call it a monitor assistant. I go in and do a few chores, and I get to work in the print shop, which is wonderful. And I'm doing monoprints. I'm painting in the print shop, figures, walking, and running them through the press, because it does something magical when it comes out of the press. And I never thought I'd like monoprint. I thought it was stupid. But now I'm tearing those up and putting those together. So I keep finding new ways to use the press and the print shop, and I'm just going to keep finding ways, because I love it there, and I've got a family there, and it's so stimulating. You steal ideas from people, and I hire the kids to model for me, so it's a win-win situation. So that's.
Your editions are very small, Dori.
Yeah, I don't make big editions.
Is there a reason?
I guess out of necessity. I mean,
It took my time
no, because I have a studio in my home. I can't walk in there anymore. Okay, I've got drawer system after drawer system after. I have so many paintings and so many etchings. The white, you know, okay? Yeah. And also, Dan, I'm a very non-traditional printmaker. I could never get an edition, it would be a varied edition.
Yeah.
Because I kind of formed my own technique of painting on the plate. And no two of them look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Good story. John, would you like to speak about Millicent's prints?
Well, since Dan said something about Millicent, I gotta say something about Dan.
Yeah.
Anybody else would look at a board with a knot in it, you know, a carpenter would say, oh, that's a bad board. But Dan looks at that same board and says, oh, this is an opportunity.
Well, you know, William Blake used to say he could look at a knot and he could see eternity, frightened to death.
Well, I see the sun there, I guess, yeah, maybe that's too simple, but I think
Yeah.
your butterfly is looking at the sun there.
Well, that's good.
But that's you, see, everybody else would say the knot was a problem. Anyway, about Millicent, I guess you know the remark about Picasso. He said God must be an artist because he made the elephant and he made the cat. And that is, I guess Millicent must be an artist because she's made prints of every kind of animal from an elephant to a cat. And of course, incidentally, we're seeing here both cats and elephants. So she's done prints about pretty much every kind of animal. When I first met her about 20 years ago, I moved into her house and there was her art, of course, over all the walls. And I guess my first reaction to it was that, you know, being a lowbrow, they're very realistic. That's what I thought first. But then after I lived with her for a while, I realized that that was kind of shortchanging her. She's really not that much of a realist. If you look at, for example, this sheep here, if you look at the head of the sheep, it's very realistic. She's an excellent draftsperson. But then you look at the rest of the sheep, and that's not a sheep. I mean, she just took 1,000,001 colors, wham, threw it on the print there, and made it work somehow. You know, it still works. So I began to realize, well, yeah, she is a very good draftsperson, but she also has a very good understanding of color. We managed to work all that together. And the third thing about her, it took me a little bit longer to appreciate, was she has a kind of a sly sense of humor. To do a sheep in the first place, I mean, sheeps are kind of silly. I mean, they are kind of funny. And this sheep is particularly funny because here he's got this gorgeous coat of many colors, but he's looking very blasé. You know, he doesn't even, you know, of course every sheep has a coat of many colors. So it looks especially funny, I think, in this case. So that's the thing. Now, there's also a turtle back there in one of the bins, which is very similar to this. There's a turtle. The turtle is drawn very realistic. It looks very Tertullian. But then she just goes wild with all these colors on top. Yeah. And of course the humor is that the turtle still looks very grouchy, despite all of the stuff over the head. So, you know, it's got all those ingredients, I think. The realism, the color, and a little bit of a sense of humor there, she shows it in. And then behind you here, you have another one of hers, which shows the same thing. Now this time she didn't use any color, but boy, you can see the technique here because those quills are just slashed, you know, and this really looks like a porcupine. You can't miss it for a porcupine. And this, if you look really closely, the sense of humor is there too. Naturalists tell us that porcupines are actually very placid animals. They go plopping around, and they're never aggressive or anything like that at all. But this porcupine, if you look closely at it, he really has a malicious expression on it. He's clearly up to no good whatsoever.
Actually, she's initial for this one.
Oh, MK.
Yeah. The only one that I've seen of her. Oh, I guess she initials all of them. They all seem to have her initials.
Yeah, she sticks with. Oh,
Yeah, interesting.
This also says something else, I think, about realism, which is that pure realism is boring. To get a work of art, you have to be, it has to be like realism to the third power. It has to be really, really, really real. And in this case, those quills look really, really, really dangerous. Okay, yeah, and unless you raise it to the third power, realism is just boring. You know, it doesn't work.
It looks like strokes of Franz Klein.
Oh my goodness! I even hesitate to put my hands on it. Quills would be. And the final one is this duck over here. Now this duck is, I think, pretty much takes her to a realistic extreme, but still, you see she has these twigs to making the nest here for the duck, and they're not just random. They're really, really, really random. I mean, she really does a job on those. So again, it's the realism, but you got to raise it to the third power to get it to work. Otherwise, it's not art. Okay, so that's why, even though I've been in the house with her for 20 years, I still enjoy her stuff, and still I feel comfortable with it. It's got the, it does have some excellent draftsmanship and complete control over the medium, and in addition, there's a little sense of humor. And this stuff is, I find it very easy to live with.
It's actually about this too, with the textural change, from the broader cutting in the nest, interrupted by the leaves, and then the finer cutting in
with the feathers.
in the breast. The wing then is different, and then the simplification of the head.
Oh, okay.
Beautifully organized, thought through.
Oh, see, there's somebody who knows what he's talking about.
I know how hard it is.
Are you an artist as well?
No, my background is in science.
Okay.
But I have learned to appreciate art as real. Of course, she tries to suck me in and says, "Oh, wouldn't you like to do some things?" And you can see the work involved in doing something like this. Forget it! I'm never going to get involved with that. I like music. That's my art. I'm going to stick to that.
Thanks, Don. And last but not least, Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly Carpenter, and I make these, for lack of a better word, fine art icons, and I just thought I'd maybe talk about a little bit about where they come from. When I was a young child, I used to like to take long walks in the woods, and my parents built this house, and there was a forest all around, and it presented an opportunity for me to take off early in the morning and sometimes until late in the afternoon, and then nobody really missed me, but it was okay because that was the 70s and we were free children. And I would go down in the woods with a shovel or some of my mother's spoons out of her cabinet, her silverware drawer. And for hours and hours, I'd just sit under these trees or walk alongside the stream beds, and I would find bottle dumps. Because back in the day, the farmers would dump their trash in these bottle dumps. And so when I would find a dump, I would dig, and I'd find treasures. I'd find little bits of metal and bottles and little pieces of glass that looked like Roman glass. And I'd dust them all off, and I'd polish them up, and I'd take them home and set them up and show everybody. And it just made me happy. And so I think what I'm doing here is something similar. I've developed this process where I make my sculptures, and I do the paintings, and I do the patina, and I polish them up, dust them off, and set them up for people to look at, and it makes me happy.
What are you modeling with?
I use an oil-based modeling clay.
Okay.
When I went to Frederick's Academy of Art, that's what I was trained in, and I have big buckets full of it in my studio because I've worked on some big pieces, and it's kind of a limitless supply, even though it's recyclable. So after I make one, I can trash it and start all line. trash it when I make the molds.
So
And
you
start
bring
all
mold,
over again.
yeah, and then what's the mold material, what's inside the mold?
Inside the mold is hydrocal.
Okay,
I have worked with just about everything, and like you, I'm trying to get as non-toxic as possible. So the molds themselves are latex, and I do make a very limited amount of them because I'm getting more and more molds. And the time that I spend making the clay and doing the paintings and doing casting, I can only do a couple castings every year. So.
Is there wooden support behind
No,
it?
it's got burlap in it,
Oh, okay.
so it's pretty sturdy.
And you're using glass. Are you using glass?
That's all glass. This is Van Gogh glass that I cut with nippers, and
Not from the stream.
not from the stream, but I would like to put some rolling glass in there sometime. That would be fun. But yeah, I also collect all the little gems and things. Like this is a little dichroic gem here. I've got a whole bunch of those, and this is dichroic glass all around here. And I also collect semi-precious stones and whatever I can get my hands on.
You feel influenced by altar pieces?
Very much. When I was a child, my parents would take me to Episcopal churches, the cathedrals and the big old stone churches, and you know, everybody would stand up and sing and sit down and then kneel and pray, and I'd go along with them, but the whole time I'm like looking at the Tiffany windows and the angels in the rafters.
Did anybody ever kneel in front of your work?
No, but I have had people cry. Yeah, which I guess is good. I don't know. Yeah, this one person came in the open studio and she was very moved by it. I think more moved than I'm moved by it. But the process itself just gives me joy.
They feel a little bit Byzantine.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very influenced by everything visually. It's just a feast for me to feed off of.
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for each other? Anything?
I see there's an elephant in that print. Speaking of elephants.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. What's that?
I was thinking too that there's no real protest here, as there could be. We're not very kind to animals. And yet, maybe appreciation is the best kind of protest anyway. That